It's time to stitch the fireworks house and 2 more sashing blocks on our hometown quilt. The fireworks house is on page 43. I will be working on sashings 13 and 14 on page 90 and 92. I have all of the fabric that has been backed with fusible interfacing, and I have the batting. As a reminder, I am adding batting and background quilting to my blocks. This is different than the pattern, and I do have a video showing how I added that to the Lori Holt files. And also, I am not cutting any of my applique fabrics or the fabrics for the sashings to size as the directions call for. I have long strips that I will use and then put back into a packet for future blocks. Let's stitch out the fireworks house and 2 more sashing blocks. I have opened the fireworks house, which is block 7, and I have my 9.5 by 9.5 hoop on the settings in my machine. And normally I have just been leaving this block as is. I have been cutting my stabilizer to size because this block is just about the right size for this hoop. However, I have decided that I am going to go ahead and do the same as I do my sashing and keep my roll of stabilizer attached. And that's just because it saves me about 5 inches. So I am just going to start doing that, which is what I normally do. And so since I am keeping the stabilizer attached, I want to move the house all the way to the top to just, conserve and save as much as I can. So after I've loaded it, I will go to layout and move, and I'm just going to bump this all the way to the top. And then at the end of this block, I will show you how much I save. So let's start stitching the fireworks house. After running the placement line for the fabric, I'm going to take the sky fabric right side up. I'm going to center it over the batting right along that placement line. Then I'm going to take the grass fabric right side down and line it up right with that sky fabric and tack it down. Now I'll flip that grass fabric, and I like to press with my fingernail, and then I have been ironing to try to keep it as flat as possible. And then I am going to add a little bit of tape just in the bottom corner to keep this grass piece down. And now it will run a tack down, and then I will start on the background quilting. After running the placement line for the house, placing the fabric, tacking it down, and trimming it, it has run a placement line for the side of the house. There will be 2 sides. These are both flip and fold. So with the side fabric, I need to place right side down, right along this placement line, a little bit past the top. I'll go to about the top of the house and then tack this down, and it will flip and fold, and then this side piece will also be tacked down. After tacking down, I'm going to fold this over and finger press, and then I have this little clover roller that I'm going to just roll to help press that flat. Even though this is a finished seam, it will have satin stitching. So now it's going to tack down, and then I will trim and then repeat the same thing on the other side. You can see that I used both sides of my strip of fabric, and so now this little excess piece I'll just cut off and put this aside. All right, now it's going to do satin stitching on both edges of these little house sides. So with these two little chimney pieces, I am going to place the fabric over the first. I'm going to let it tack down, and once it cuts the thread, I am going to manually stop my machine. It will move to the next chimney, but it will not stitch out. Then I'm going to go ahead and trim and move this over and use the bottom piece just to conserve. After running the satin stitch on the little side pieces of the house as well as the chimneys, it's ready to do the satin stitching along the sides of the house. And again, this is a flip and fold and really either doesn't need a satin stitch or doesn't need to be a flip and fold. It could have just been a regular applique. However, I am following the directions, and we will add a satin stitching, and then it will move on to the windows. So I'm going to do the same thing with the windows as I did the chimney. I'm going to put my fabric down, tack down, and then manually stop my machine before it moves to these two windows. And I think this is wide enough to do, two windows and then move it over to the same spot. Again, that's just something I like to do. The last few steps will be the applique for the door, the bushes, and the roof, and then we'll finish with the cute embroidered fireworks. So I just ordered these Kimberbell scissors and I really like them. I have several that are this double curved, but I really like this new pair. All right, we'll finish up the roof and then there's a little step and a doorknob and then we'll get to the fireworks. I love this house. I know I say that every single time, and I have loved them all. Again, all of the detail, these cute little stitched windows look like they have shutters. Just the detail is great. I love it. Now, the only change that I really made was for a couple of the fireworks. So the original called for this darker willow, which is what we use for the bushes a lot. And I went with the lighter green, which in my case is clover, and it's a little bit brighter. I'm glad I did that. Not, too much of a change, but um, I wanted to go with the brighter. Now the pink firework was supposed to be this pink that outlines the door, and I just knew that that wouldn't show up like the other 4. And so I went with my taffy, which is the darker pink, and I am so glad that I did. I just don't think that when you look at this, that would have been very noticeable. It would have probably looked more like there was just 4 fireworks. All right, so I wanted just to show, I moved my block all the way to the top. And I wanted just to show, and I'm not sure why I didn't do this at the beginning. I guess because I figured that this is about, the same as the hoop, and it wasn't saving much, which, in the scheme of things, maybe it's really not. But you can see that my hoop ended here, and I would have probably cut. And so that's probably at least 5 or 6 inches. Again, that doesn't seem like much, but this is my 7th block. And if I would have done this, moved it to the top, saved 5 inches, that would have been, 30 inches. That would have been almost 2 hoopings worth. Anyways, so that's what I'm going to do. So now I will just trim this off. Again, I have the roll, just attached here, and I'll just roll it up and, save me some stabilizer. All right, so I'm going to go get started on the sashing blocks. I've just finished the house block, and I have my 7 by 12 inch hoop on my machine, and I've changed that in the settings. And on my USB, I need to go to the Combined Files Sashing folder, and I need to find Sashing 13. And I will hit Set and Embroidery. Now I'm going to go to Layout and Rotate, and I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees to the left. And then I'm going to move this all the way to the top. And because I have my hoop on my machine and I selected Embroidery, it's not going to let me go past my stitching area. So I'll hit OK, and I will go to Return and Add, and I will go back to the USB and my Sashings folder, and I need to find Sashing 14. And I can't believe I'm on Sashing 13 and 14 already. So I will select 14 and hit Set. Now, before I hit Embroidery, I do need to rotate this. If I hit Embroidery, then this will be combined and I won't be able to move this independently. So I will go to Edit and rotate left to 90 degrees. And it's right in the correct spot, so I don't need to do any additional moving. I will select OK and Embroidery. And again, I moved these up to the top. I still have my stabilizer attached to the roll. And so everything below the second block is able to be saved, and that is probably about 10 inches or so. And that's a lot. If I save that much just from 2 hoopings, I have enough to do another hooping, and to me, that's worth leaving it attached. I do want to note that I always pull slack from the roll so that my hoop can move freely and nothing will get caught and it doesn't interfere with all of the stitching. All right, so let's start on sashing 13 and 14. I'm going to start the same way as always. I will do the placement for the batting, place my batting and tack it down and trim it, and then start on the base fabric, which is the flip and fold. need to take my fabric and center it over the batting and line it right up with that placement. And then I'll take my green fabric and put that right side down and line it up and do the tack down. So I need to flip and fold this, and I've been really trying to, be diligent and pay attention to really getting this pressed back, just because I don't want the stitching from the embroidery to go onto the green fabric, which I have had in a few blocks. But my last one worked out so good. It was just perfect. And so I'm hoping that that's because I was a little bit, more cautious. So I am going to tape this, and we'll see how this one works this time. So now it's going to tack down both fabrics, and then we'll trim and continue on with the flip and fold. Now I will trim. The most important is to trim this right side, and that's because we're going to do another flip and fold. And I have cut mine, of course, into long strips. So I am going to cut this left piece. Now, if you've cut according to the directions and have a smaller piece, then this is a side that doesn't really need to be cut because it will be trimmed when we trim the block. Again, I'm cutting mine because I have a big long strip. All right, so now it will do a placement line, which just runs right along this same stitching. And I will place the next piece of fabric right side down, flip it, tack it down, and then do the last piece, and we'll be ready to get to the embroidering. For this piece, I am going to flip it and finger press, and then I am going to use this little clover roller and kind of see if I can flatten that seam. And I'll go ahead and tape while this tacks down. This will just tack down a little tiny piece. And then we'll do the last. And then I'll trim this last piece up. Now, again, if you've cut yours to size, for this last piece, you won't need to trim because that will just be taken care of when the block is trimmed to size. All right, so now we're going to start the embroidery. So my bobbin thread is almost empty, so I am going to cut my thread. And change my bobbin. I had this sitting here and I should have changed it before. I knew I was getting low and I should have changed it before I started all the embroidery. So now instead of just starting, which I probably could start, but this doesn't have a locking stitch. So what I like to do is go to the minus plus needle, which I normally do when I start stitching, and I hadn't that time. And I am just going to go back maybe 5 stitches just to kind of go over the stitch that I had to cut so it doesn't come loose. So I'll push the -1 5 or 6 times. It's, you know, just whatever I think is good, and I think 5 is good. So now I will just continue stitching. So here's the first sashing block, and as always, I love it. I think the embroidery designs are so incredible. Just the texture and the pattern looking stitches is just, again, fabulous. Now this side, you can see how it kind of pulled away from when I trimmed. I trimmed pretty close. This brown is super, super dense, and if I would have realized, you know, how dense it was, I probably would have trimmed it a little bit farther out. You can see that it pulled in. My trimming line goes to here, so it really shouldn't affect anything, but this was a lot of embroidery. So with that being said, look how great this side looks. And that may be that I'm being a little bit more careful pressing this open so that the stitching doesn't get onto this green fabric. It may be that, or it may just be that, you know, the file. So I love it. All right, so I am going to continue with the second sashing, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning, that there is a second print fabric for the next sashing block. It will be the second fabric instead of the pink. In this quilt, there are 4 rows of sashing, and each row has one sashing block that has one different fabric. So it will still have the green and the pink, the green, and then it will have a different fabric. This one happens to be this green fabric. And so everything else is the same, except instead of this pink fabric, I'll be using green. All right, so I'm going to finish up the second sashing block and we'll be done. Also, for the placement and tack down lines of all of the fabric, I just put in a neutral color because, again, the first color on this is this dark green, and I don't want that showing in the seams when I press and fold those over. All right, let's get started. On this second part of the sashing, it just stitched a little box for a piece of applique. It will be this pink fabric, and I am just going to cover and then tack it down. And now I'll trim it. I'm going to save this other little square just in case I need it. I needed the other one when one of the sashings also had this little box. And so I'll just cut this. Actually, I think I'm just going to leave it. This is on a brand new strip. And if I come across another little piece, then I'll have it ready to go. All right, there's one more bit of embroidery and then this sashing block is done. So here are the two sashing blocks. They look great, and this one again lined up super good on this first piece. Now, I want to note that on this piece of fabric that is the different print, you'll note that I did not trim it like I normally do, and that's because I had cut this to size and I didn't have a big long strip, so that's why I didn't need to trim it. And there's a couple of things that I could have cut this a little bit closer to the pink applique fabric. I have a few spots where this pink fabric is kind of fraying through, and it's kind of hard to tell, but this satin stitch around the outside is actually not just a plain satin stitch. It's a decorative satin stitch. You can't really tell, and it could have easily just been a plain satin stitch and it would have looked probably better, but I love them. Again, I always love all of the designs that have been in this quilt. All right, so it's time to cut our blocks to size. To trim the house block, I will take Lori Holt's ruler and line up the 1.5 inches right along the seam line between the sky and the grass, and then I will kind of center, the best that I can between the right and left tack down. And I want again to note that if you are not using Lori Holt's ruler, which you don't have to, however, this is made specifically, to line up and cut this block, you would want to line up a regular ruler at 1 3/4. And that's because her ruler is 1.5 inches is where I have it lined up. And then this teal border is 1/4 inch. So it's actually 1 3/4 inches to the bottom trim line. So if you look with a regular ruler, right at the seam line to the bottom of her ruler is 1 3/4 inches. So that's important if you are not using her ruler. And again, I'll just center it otherwise the best I can and cut. All right, now let's cut the sashing blocks. So the sashing blocks are just cut with a regular ruler, and I can cut the tops and bottoms, which is actually, the sides, since they are lined up when we brought them in from software. And so I will line up a line along that trim guide just to make sure I have it even. It's just another way to make sure everything's even. I'll line up the 2 stitching lines. And I could have made this a little bit darker. I kept in this sky blue in it, but it's pretty tough to see. So this would have been a good one to maybe put the black in. So I have it lined up along both. And then I can flip this around and do this other side. And again, it's hard to see, but I have the blue trim guide. This white or this light thread is the tack down, so that's not the trimming guide. So I'll line up one right here, and then along the blue. And then I'll cut the sides. These look so great. I love them. So I will again put that in the packet with my houses. And then for the sashing, these 2 go to row 3, and so I will just keep them in order. Although, of course, the sashings you really could put in any order you want. All right, so we're almost done with row 3. We have the long blocks still left to do, but I'm going to do those, I think, after I finish all of the other sashings. All right, so we have more blocks done on our hometown quilt.